regular meeting for the City Council of Temple City to order on June 20th, 2023 at 7:49 p.m. Madam City Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Sternquist.
Present.
Councilmember Vizcarra.
Here.
Councilmember Yu.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Chavez.
Here.
Mayor Mann.
Here. Tonight, we will have, for the invocation, we will have Councilmember Sternquist provide. Please rise for the invocation and remain standing for the pledge.
Thank you. Let us pray. Good and loving Father, our source of love, light, and wisdom, bless us as we begin work on behalf of our city. It is our privilege and our responsibility to support, foster, and advance the mission of Temple City. Give us foresight by which we plan for the future. Give us confidence to discover and explore new possibilities. Give us wisdom to discern what is right, good, and just. Send your creative spirit upon us. We ask for your guidance and grace to use our talents for the advantage of this city we call home. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
If I could ask Deputy Lamb to lead us in the pledge, please. Thank you.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Next, for ceremonial matters, we have the Commissioner Oath of Office for our Parks and Recreation Commission, Planning Commission, and Transportation and Public Safety Commission. So on our June 6th meeting, we affirmed the appointment of city commissioners that will serve from July 2023 to June of 2025. And tonight, the city clerk will administer their oath of office. So I would like to invite Planning Commissioners John Cordes and Beverly Guan, Parks and Recreation Commissioners Lance Barodi, Cynthia Vance, and Transportation Public Safety Commissioners Joe Catalan, Michael Stoll, and Jeffrey Sue to the front, please. Planning Commissioners Jeffrey Lee and Parks and Recreation Commissioner Joanne Rosso were not able to make the meeting tonight, so they took their office last week at the city clerk's office. And after the oath, please stay up there. We do have certificates to present for each of you, and we would all like to get a photo.
Yeah.
And if I could ask the council to come with me up front, we'll present certificates and we'll get a photo.
Cindy and John, open up your certificates. There you go. Right there. Okay. Good. Great, thank you.
Is the dog still there? Is the dog still there? Your perspective. You got it.
I just want to say many thanks to our commissioners. They are an extension of the city council. Your dedication does not go unnoticed, so we greatly and deeply appreciate the amount of time you put in to make Temple City a better place. Thank you all.
Thanks so much.
All right, next we have consent calendar items. It could all be approved in a single motion unless there's any items we want to. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I skipped something. Public comments on items not listed on the agenda. Are there any comments at this time? All right, seeing none, we will move to consent calendar. Are there any items we wish to pull, or can we have a motion for this?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar. Motion to approve the consent calendar, sorry. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any objections? All right, seeing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Sternquist?
Yes?
Councilmember Vizcarra?
Yes.
Councilmember Yu?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chavez?
Yes.
Mayor Mann?
Yes. Consent calendar has been approved. Next, we move on to our public hearing, 8A, adoption of resolution number 23-5679, approving the master fees and fines schedule for fiscal year 2023-2024. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor Mann. Our Administrative Services Director will go over the master fee and fine schedule. This does not, while it's a public hearing, it does not have the same impact as what the budget would be. So you can take this tonight if you wish, but the other two items will have to be continued. So I'll turn it over to Susan.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. So tonight is the public hearing for our master fees and fines schedule. So the City Council is requested to open the public hearing, receive any input, close the public hearing, and adopt resolution number 235679, approving the master fees and fines schedule for fiscal year 2023-2024. Some of the highlights of the schedule is that we are increasing a majority of the fees by 3%. As you know, the CPI from March 2022 to March 2023 was 3.7. The 3% is consistent with last year's increase, so that is why the 3% is being used. The notable increases that we have is one of the corrections we had to make was the animal control delinquent fees. So what it does is reflects now the delinquent fees charge is really the double of the regular dog license fees. So that's being corrected. The increase also is business license. Some of the fees are up to $17. Other processing fees are up to $16. I know there was a discussion of the business license fees, but we could probably take a look at that during next year and get direction from council on what we need to do with those fees. The next one is the planning service fees that will take effect in 60 days from approval. If it's today, then it'll be 60 days from today. And the increases range up to $35. And then lastly, one of the notable increases is the public safety fees. We have the special event permit, the street banner permit, and the street closure permit, all increasing $19, $13, $17 respectively. That is it for the presentation, so take any questions if you have any.
Are there any questions from council at this time?
What?
Councilmember Yu?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
I know in our packet, you had noted significant items that were not increased. Do you have that list by any chance that maybe you could kind of briefly go over? Because I know on the PowerPoint we have the ones that were increased, but, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I just thought for the public's purpose, maybe to highlight those that were not increased, because I think some of those really go to things that we've in the past have decided, because it affects the public specifically, we want to keep a good lid on those kind of things. So, do you have that by any chance?
I don't, but I can briefly.
I think it's in the report, I think,
That's
wasn't it?
Page 2 of the report.
Isn't it in the report, Vince? I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, the page 2 of the report.
It's all right. Maybe we can come back to it, but I just thought it might be nice to, because there are some things on that list that we did not increase, which I think.
Some of the fines for vehicles, like ticketing, did not increase.
Well, that's for fines, but more like
Yes.
fees that we charge the public for various, like, for example, recreation, things like that. Some of the programs that we have, we kept them the same, I believe.
Well, I guess to Mayor Pro Tem, your point, I
Yeah, you
I
have that
have
in
I have it
front
in front of you,
Yeah.
so for the public, just to share with
of you. Yeah,
everyone.
if you don't mind.
Yeah, on page 2 of the staff report, no increases are proposed for the following. All general fees, the annual dog license for altered dog for seniors, the daily overnight parking permit, the oversized parking permit sticker replacement or transfer, the penalty for overstay in an EV station, and administrative fees for excursions, fee and charge classes, Stars Club, Teen Zone, youth sports. And then I think to Director Paragas' point, the remaining are fines that for certain violations that we don't need to get into.
Yeah, thank you. I just thought it would be nice to highlight that
Yeah.
to the public.
Yeah.
So.
And that's a good point, because we always emphasize the Parks and Rec programming as being key things.
Just so I understand, these are the ones that remained as they were?
That's
Yes,
correct.
there were no
change.
increases.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
May I have just a clarification question for
Sure.
Director Parkas? Because it's noted in your slide, animal control delinquent fees, it says notable increases, but you don't mean an increase. You're just saying that the fee actually just reflected that we actually collect twice that.
In
of
the
our regular
past
license.
schedule, it was incorrectly stated
Right.
for the amount. So for fiscal year 23-24, we are stating correctly the amount. So it's not really
an
increasing. Yeah.
increase, even though
Correct.
it's listed under notable
Correct.
increases. Just want to clarify that.
Okay, any other questions from council? All right, seeing none, I will open the public hearing. Does anyone wish to address council on this item? All right, seeing none, I will close the public comment. Any final council questions or comments on this matter? Councilmember Sturklis? Mayor Pro Tem?
No.
Councilmember Yu?
Just a real quick comment. I think we should underscore the fact that, yeah, there are increases, but it's actually definitely compared to the overall annual escalation that we all been experiencing from 8 to 10%. So this is actually way below that. And I know you quoted 3.7 CPI, but I think compared to the year before, it really CPI was much higher. So I think it's a reasonable increase. And to Mayor Pro Tem's point, there were certain things we kept the same. So we're trying. So, good.
Just a comment, Mayor.
Okay, sure, thank you. Councilmember Viscara?
No.
Yeah, and I do want to reiterate, Mayor Pro Tem brings up a great point. As a policy, we can determine what fees we're going for full recovery and what fees we intend to subsidize, because those are the types of things we want to encourage our community to take a part of. And so a lot of these on this list is focused on a lot of the youth sports and Stars Club and things of that nature. So I think that's been consistent with the way our council policy has been going for the last 8 years or so, or even longer. So with that, can we have a motion for this item?
Mayor, I would make a motion to adopt resolution number 23-5679, approving the master fees and fine schedule for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no objections, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Sternquist,
Yes.
Councilmember Viscara,
Yes.
Councilmember Yu,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chavez,
Yes.
Mayor Mann.
Yes. All right. Next, we have item 8B, on the second item on the public hearing to continue the public hearing of fiscal year 2023-2024 proposed annual budget and appropriations limit. Mr. Cook?
Simply stated, we're asking you to continue this to Friday, June 23rd at 8 a.m.
Is it 8 a.m.
8
or 9
a.m.
a.m.?
It's 9 a.m.
9 a.m.
Sorry.
Don't make it worse than it is.
Unless we're
Extra
having-
coffee for
unless
Councilmember
we're having
Viscara.
breakfast at 8 a.m. I don't know.
We could stop breakfast at
Bagel,
9.
Goldstein, everything. Bagel.
Okay.
Do we
I just
need
got-
a vote?
I got roped into something else. Okay.
So if there's no questions or objections, I think we need a motion to continue this, right? Is that?
Yes, please move in second because we are continuing a public hearing. Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing of fiscal year 2023-2024 proposed annual budget and appropriations limit to Friday, what's the actual date?
June
23rd.
June 23rd at 7 a.m. I mean,
7
9
a.m.
a.m.
Whoa, making it
Got even
much
earlier.
worse.
That's the sheriff's meeting.
9 a.m.
The sheriff's meeting. Okay, we have a motion.
I second that.
Oh, and we have a second. Okay, can we get a roll call vote on that, please?
Councilmember Sternquist.
Yes.
Councilmember Viscara,
Yes.
Councilmember Yu,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chavez.
Yes.
Mayor Mann.
Yes. So we will continue that this Friday. Next, unfinished business, we have none. Next, new business, 10A, review of proposed fiscal year 2023-2024 street rehabilitation project. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor Mann and members of the council. First, I'd like to thank the standing committee of Councilmember Yu and Councilmember Mann. This is a reflection of a lot of hours and 2 long meetings with both Councilmember Mann, or Mayor Mann and Councilmember Yu to bring to you what we have today. I've touched upon it just a little bit during the budget study session, but I think it's important to hear from our city engineer, Ali Khair from TransTech, to kind of understand and some of the relevant points that Mayor Pro Tem, or questions that Mayor Pro Tem Chavez brought up, and kind of why we have we're moving forward with this approach, so that there's not this fear that there's some kind of engineering or technical compromise we're making with what we're proposing today. Really, Councilmember Yu and Councilmember Mayor Mann asked us to be creative without compromising, and I think that's what's been that's what you have in front of you today. And so, the action that we'll ask you to do today is after Mr. Khair's made the presentation and answered any of your questions you have, is allow us to proceed with going out to bid. And what we'll do, Mr. Murphy and I are going to actually work on a couple things as well to kind of alleviate a little bit of bureaucracy and seeing how much we can wrap up quickly in the process as well, so that we can deliver this project. It is an intensive project. It is one of the more intensive that we've done, even though the last one was, in terms of square footage, in some ways very similar, but Mr. Kyer will go over for the next 10 to 15 minutes some of the nuances of that, so you understand exactly the approach we're taking and why we're taking it. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it over to Mr. Kyer.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Good evening, Mayor, Council members. We have a very detailed presentation tonight for you. It's an interactive presentation. We actually track what we have done in this city for the past almost 10 years on Google Earth. Literally, all the work is embedded in the system. It moves with it, it measures with it, it's tracked with it. We do that for many cities. Based on our experience with this city as well as a number of cities where we implement these creative ideas but yet sound engineering ideas to come up with results that are not only satisfactory from an engineering standpoint, also economically efficient and cost-effective, as well as minimizes impacts to our residents and community. There are ways to do rehab that can take weeks, months, impacting residents, accessibility, or we can do things sooner. So we're finding the optimum way of doing things based on our experience, personally 40 years myself. These are all tried and monitored and proven techniques that we're starting to implement, not only in this city, in many other cities. With that, we'll start our presentation. Furkan, our associate engineer, also he was chief inspector on the last rehab project, which we successfully completed, was very instrumental, among with our several senior level inspectors and engineers who drove every street several times, looked at things before we prepared this presentation. Go ahead, Furkan, next slide. Oh, there's a pin there. Could you switch? I know where this. Could you switch to our clear presentation? Sorry about that. This slide basically provides an overview of City of Temple City's street system. My apologies. I don't know why that pin dropped in that. There you go. Total center line miles in the city is 72.4 miles, and then square foot of pavement areas 13.9 million square feet. Arterial streets 13.8 and 3.5. Collectors 38.9 and 7 million. And residential 19.7 and 3.4. As you may remember, back in 2018, we prepared, or a consultant, NC Engineering, hired by the city, prepared PMP report. And after completion of this cycle, upcoming cycle, we actually are going to retain a consultant again to do a new PMP report, which will give us really where we are with our payment management program. Next. Since fiscal year 24, 2015, almost 10 years, approximately 8.6 million square feet streets have been rehabilitated in the city. And this included approximately 4.1 million square feet of slurry seal. As you may know, slurry seal is the lowest level of street rehabilitation. And then 4.5 million square feet of cold mean overlay. And this translates to 62% of streets rehabilitated one way or another, and 38% remaining. Next slide, please. And this is our fiscal year 23-24 rehab program. Next, please. Next, continue. Again, the basis of our decisions and evaluations are embedded in our PMP report, which categorizes our streets in 5 groups. Category 1 is streets in very good shape, 2 is, and 3 are good, and 4 is poor, and 5 is very poor. In reality, between 4 and 5, there isn't a whole lot of difference, but very poor is basically a little less, more damage than category 4. Next, please. Our consideration developing our program for this year was based on basically cost of first consideration, cost of cold mill overlay versus full reconstruction. As you may remember from our previous presentations on the PMP report, the streets are categorized based on what we call pavement condition index. And pavement condition index is based on not necessarily any extensive street corings or structural section evaluation, all that. It's based on a drive-through and picking up certain points or criteria as they drive through. You know, if you have so many potholes in certain distance, you get a point. So it's a point system, and then you come up with that PCI, pavement condition index, and then you categorize them poor, very poor, etc. So, yes.
Do you mind if we interrupt with
Oh,
questions?
by all
Or
means,
do you
please
wanna
do.
finish?
It's up to you.
What is I'm not a civil, what's a cold mill overlay?
Cold mill is cold mill overlay is a process, two-step process, where the existing approximately anywhere from 1.5 inch to 4 inch of asphalt is removed by grinding. It's called cold mill because it's done with the machine in a cold process. And after that, new asphalt is overlaid. This is the cold mill and overlay two-step process. And slurry seal is, in essence, an oil layer put on the street, existing street, where the oil leaks or penetrates in the cracked areas and seals those areas and then prevents further intrusion of water, which would not damage the base any further. Slurry seal is a limited rehab. It's preventative maintenance, maybe 5 years, 6, 7 in best case scenario, whereas cold mill overlay is 15, 20 years, and full reconstruction can be 20, 30 years. But if you look at your streets, a lot of streets which were probably reconstructed or are totally reconstructed maybe 25, 30 years ago, they are not, most of the cold mill areas are almost either in good or in bad condition equally compared to those two approaches, because structurally your streets are actually in good condition. As you can see, if you drive, you see a lot of cracks and all that, but you don't see a lot of dips or collapsed areas, potholes in the streets. It's really, most of the damages are in the drivable surface areas. So that's one of the reasons we're also looking at these different options. Next, please.
Can
So you can,
I'm
yes,
sorry,
please.
Can I just ask one quick question? Can you give us an example of the streets in Temple City, or a street in Temple City that has recently gone through a cold mill overlay, and then one that perhaps has gone through a full reconstruction, let's say in the last
sure.
5 to 10 years?
Sure, we have pictures.
Oh, you have pictures?
Yeah, we
Okay,
have
so-
pictures coming up. I can.
All right, no problem, we'll wait till then.
Okay,
Thank
all right,
you.
okay.
Thank you.
We don't have a full reconstruction with a lot of what we call partial or localized area reconstructions. I'll get into those details, but we'll be able to compare those two very clearly. Next, please. Next, continue. The second consideration was, of course, impacts adjacent properties, and this is something we deal a lot during construction, and it's really inconvenience to residents to have a driveway closed all day long, 2 days, or accessibility or parking blocked or eliminated. You see, for example, on a slurry seal, you pretty much block driveways all day long. It takes a long time for slurry seal to cure. But contrary to some misconception, cold mill overlay, even though it's more impactful work, it is not that impactful in terms of accessibility or to the residents, because as you cold mill, literally as soon as the machine passes your driveway in a few minutes, you drive into your driveway or park on the street. When you overlay asphalt, in about 4 hours, the asphalt is totally drivable. In case of emergencies, we even throw some sand sometimes. We let residents drive in and out of the driveways within an hour of passing by the driveway. So these are important considerations in our evaluation. Next, please. Go back. Full reconstruction is, as I will show in some of the pictures, is the most impactful, because in the full reconstruction, you basically remove not only asphalt and the base, but as well as what we call native sub-base. It could be 12, 14, 18 inches, depending upon what you find. And that means the street elevation between the driveways and removed area is very significant. You can't even ramp it up. So that's very impactful. Next, please. And our experience that with both options that we used for poor and very poor streets. We have actually have now pictures. We're gonna go into that shows what we have done in the past 10 years. We have pictures. We actually tracked all these and how they looked today and how they looked just before we actually did the work. Continue, please. Here's an example from our recent project. We're starting with the recent project because one of the unusual conditions we experienced this year and last year was heavy rains. And we would have expected more damages or some damages, but I guess either we were lucky or maybe we were very careful how we inspected and tested everything. We've basically come out of this year after our project with almost no damage on newly paved areas. This is again, this picture doesn't really show the whole thing, but if we zoom in, for example, on the south lower right corner of the left picture, you see the cracks and all that. They're very extensive cracks in reality. This after we paved the street and overlaid. Continue, please. This is a cul-de-sac, Raucous, and as you can see, the pavement is all cracked up, a lot of smaller pieces. It's very visible, this after we paved the street. And the damages on these streets would be more prominent, more visible if there was structural issues, because people do tight turns as they go into cul-de-sac and all that. We picked these streets to show exactly, at least you can see what the differences are. Next, please. At Senar Street, Cloverly, as you can see on the left, the damage, and this street probably hasn't been paved for many years, probably at least 20 years, if not more. As you can see, the damage is on the surface, and we paved the street, and this is how it looks like today. Next, please. That's again another one on Primrose. That was also heavily damaged street. That's what it looks like today. Next, please. And here is a good example that combines cold mill and full reconstruction areas. We do run into, as we do these projects, sections of the streets where we need to do R&R, full reconstruction. As you can see, this is from 2017, how it looked like. We literally in the field, as we do cold mill and expose some of the areas, we make decisions based on field conditions. Even though we have these itemized in the bid schedule as estimate areas, we go in there, mark, and then this is a perfect example where we did an R&R in that white outline area. And this is the street. As of a few days ago, that's approximately 6 years. It's holding very good. The rest of the street, cold mill and overlay, as you can see, you cannot tell the difference. The area cold mill overlay is holding just as good as area that was R&R'd. Next, please. Here's another example of very poor street.
And
Next.
one more example of that too is actually the northbound lanes of Rosemead and Las Tunas as you're crossing the street across from Camellia Square. There's a culvert that is about pretty close to the size of what you're seeing on La Rosa right now, and where we did a combination of cold mill and overlay with the complete rehabilitation with a culvert, which I won't go into the technical. I won't have Ollie go into the technical explanations of it. But what we would have seen over time, and we've been monitoring it, what we would have seen is some level of compromise in the pavement, so that we almost make this kind of surgical strike into the pavement and leave the rest at a less costly application. So the two converging together are not creating any structural issues that we would need to be concerned about to do the entire thing. So the good planning by TransTech, but also too, we, for lack of a better term, we have proof of concept that this approach is working throughout the city.
This is where?
This one's at La Rosa, but there's also a similar type of rehabilitation effort that we did on the at the intersection of Las Tunas and Rosemead Boulevard as well.
There is on the north side of Rosemead, north of Las Tunas, there's a huge old concrete culvert. In that area, one option would have been to replace the whole thing, but drainage would be a problem. We have to rework the drainage on that. Basically, it transfers water from northwest to northeast corner, by the way. It's an interesting setup. It's been done was done maybe 30, 40 years ago. So we did do a Coleman overlay approach with a little bit of additional, what we call pavement fabric, to also minimize the cracking coming up from the bottom to the top of the asphalt. So that minimizes that as well. It's a very solid, it's not going anywhere, but at least we want to also minimize that surface cracks. That doesn't look very pleasant.
So these determinations, though, aren't made until you actually begin the work? From what I
We-
understand, you started the job as a cold mill overlay, but then you discovered that, well, maybe we need to do some additional work and then do it at that time?
No, we actually
ahead
identified
of
these
time?
areas. We have literally a bid item for cold mill R&R localized areas. Then as we cold mill these areas, we have to first also expose, then we adjust the limits as necessary. Sometimes we do less, sometimes we do more, depending upon what we find out.
That's gotta be difficult to budget, though, doesn't it?
No, we do budget. We're coming in very well
Okay.
within the budget. on these things.
Within this last project that we've done, we have come in within budget with these considerations to make, and these are, you're right, Mayor Pro Tem, these are field decisions that we're making,
Right, that's what I thought.
but
Yeah.
we are staying within budget. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So
they
we do
also
consider
include
these
bid-
upfront.
Bid alternatives, so that should there need to be
Yeah.
a need, they can adjust it up and
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, so you know there are some contingencies that may occur.
Yeah, these are not necessarily contingency. They are built into the bid prices, so we know about unit prices. So we're not paying more or extra or additional. It's just we're able to use unit prices to handle these things. Next, please. Now I think we're going to go next slide. We're going to go a little different direction. Oh, that's Las Tunas. I mean, we all remember how Las Tunas looked like. Heavy traffic. It's one of our heavily traveled, most heavily traveled streets. You know, it's almost equal to Rosemead. Again, we could zoom in, but I'm sure you remember these areas, how bad it looked and all that. But with all that thing, street was structurally sound because we never had any potholes on Las Tunas. We went one step further on Las Tunas. We did 4-inch cold mill overlay in order to provide a little weather top section, and it's done in 2 layers. We don't just overlay 4, we do 2-inch and then come back and put the final cap. It provides us very good, strong, solid surface that will last many years.
Is that because of the heavier traffic?
It's heavier traffic, plus we don't want to come back and do any work on Las Tunas. We want to minimize anything like repair work 5-10 years from now. That's really a combination of things. Okay, next please. All right. So basically our 23-24 rehab program includes cold mill overlay with what we call local area dig-outs. As this dig-out is R&R, by the way. We refer to that as dig-out because even though...
Sounds better.
Well,
Sounds
not,
better,
yes,
dig-out.
it does. It does, and actually it makes a difference too because we don't necessarily go all the way down to the sub-base sometimes. We're able to handle it within 4 inches, for example, instead of 8 inches, 10 inches of depth. All right. We went through, and it's mainly we're doing Category 5 very poor streets with some poor streets, but as I said, after evaluation, we picked the streets for several reasons that I mentioned, as well as group them as much as possible where the cost effectiveness is also part of the consideration. Because you don't want to do just one block here and go move the machine one block to north and all that. So we're doing it in all these 10 years, we're doing it that in methodological approach where we moved everything in an efficient manner.
And we maintain records that tells us, like, for example, on these category of very poor streets, when some work was done
Yes.
on that before.
I'll be happy to share that, yes.
No,
we
no,
do.
I'm just saying.
Yes, we do.
So these could be 10 and 20 years ago, or?
Well, we don't know before our time, but we
Right.
maintain records since we started
Since we
here.
go
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yes. All right, next, please. Okay, these are static displays, but I'd like to at least share with you what we do actually on Google. So if you can bring up to Google, Furkan, and you'll see the approach and how we track all these things. This is a real Google Earth. This is the only thing that we added right now is your city boundary. Turn off the boundary, Furkan. So that's what we see on Google Earth. You can zoom in and all that as you all familiar. Now go ahead and turn on the boundary, city boundary. And we're here. This is our city. And let's go ahead and turn on, Furkan, our map as of 2018. This is 2018 PMP map, overlaid to the scale. It will enlarge, get smaller, whatever. It will be scaled as you move on the Google. You'll see all the streets staying there. So now turn off that map, Furkan. Bring up the first rehab project.
Sorry.
All right, that's all right. Bring up the streets that we have done, layer by layer. We start, as you can see, we're keeping track of everything year by year. On the left-hand side, you can see that. Here's what we have done. Green represents slurry seal. Blue represents cold mill overlay with some localized R&R. Next year, next cycle, Furkan, we're building that again. We're now here. Next, Furkan, next layer. It's populating. Next one, Furkan. And then I think next one was last year's, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, more. That's Las Tunas. Keep. Next. Here we are. He said this is the last year project. Now we have done all these streets. That's what represents the percentage I shared at the first slide. Now we're going to add to that with dark blue lines the streets that we're proposing. Bring it up, Furkan. Flash it. As you can see, these are the streets we're proposing. They're all fitting together. On the upper left, you see a section of Garibaldi, and then there are a couple sections next to it. Those are additional, which I'll share with you. So we added additional bid items. The reason being that is when we get the bids, it varies. I mean, there is at least 20%, 30% sometimes spread. Even if you take out the lowest and highs, you're still spreading about 20% or so. So that gives us that flexibility. So we don't have to come back and decide what we're going to do with the leftover money. If there's leftover money, we'll add. If not, we won't add those streets. As simple as that. The base bid, though, is evaluated based on just those dark blue lines. Plus, there are few alleys. If you zoom in on the southwest corner, zoom in here, there are these alleyways. This is the first time we're hitting alleys in the city. Is based on staff maintenance, city staff maintenance staff. They are spending a lot of effort to repair these alleys, as you can see. So we're going to be doing these alleys as well. As you can literally just go into street drive and see what's happening there. Go back to normal view, Furkan. Zoom out.
How's the alley behind you?
All right.
Are the alleys considered city property?
Yeah, they are public property. Yes. Yeah,
and those alleys are the most frequented in terms of, the most amount of service calls we get. There is a bit of a complication with the one that goes through the metro market, but we think it's best in the recommendation at this time because it kind of splits between a parking lot, but that is a public alley.
This one?
You can see some of the conditions there. We'll be approaching the property owner at some point as well about it, but our service calls there are immense, so if we can do a cold mill overlay, that would alleviate a lot of time of our maintenance crew doing the amount of service hours we provide in that area.
So is that
what constitutes a service call?
You can see some of the patching there, Councilmember Viscara. So over time, like the huge rains,
Okay, I got it.
those are enormous potholes that the crews can take care of. And our crews can take care of a certain level of pothole repair. At that point, Mr. Armenta, our lead maintenance worker, will contact his colleague at the County of Los Angeles, especially if they do have to do certain level of dig outs and other things, equipment level, with equipment that we just don't frankly have, nor would we have constant use for. That's why we rely on our county partners to assist us in that process.
So this photo, is that considered a public street? Or
This
public
whole
alley?
section you see kind of where
Or the
all
yellow?
the
lights,
mess
like that you
is,
go.
that is the public alley.
That is a public alley.
Yes.
Yes,
it
it
is.
is.
Hmm.
So-
All right?
Too bad.
Yes. Okay, what's the next slide on the presentation? I think we are done. Oh, that we do want to share also, just as a FYI, future information, we do have additional projects coming online in the future, in the next year or so, with outside funds as well, because outside funds are very limited to use which streets we can, repair. If it's a Prop C, local metro funds, has to be transit route. We cannot use it on any street. So a good example is on Lower Azusa, you have transit route only on the east side, but not on the west side. So we're using federal, local, federal funds allocations on the west side, and then we're going to use Metro Prop C funds on the east side, so we can manage our funds as efficiently as possible and do more work. And the other one is the North-South Street on the very east side, as you can see, red, yellow highlighted area there. So these are future streets, future projects, but we're going to get to Lower Azusa as well in the next couple of years or so with those funds. They're all programmed, by the way. It takes a process to go through federal funding and Metro. They're all programmed for future years.
My understanding of Lower Azusa is that half is owned by us and half is owned by Almani.
It's a bit of
Only a portion,
it's a
you're
mixed
right,
bag.
but in essence, we are the majority owner on Lower
On
Azusa.
both sides.
Yeah, because
East and west.
their properties on the south side, on the south coast face, so they're getting all the benefits. We're carrying the cost, basically.
Because as we're summing up, just a couple, we'll just show you a couple more slides on just next slide, please. On
Yes.
just these are just the streets that
Yes.
you saw from the map that meet those criterias. And as Mr. Kair stated, if you can go back up one, please. We are going to do the add alternates for Garibaldi, so that we can evaluate from a budgetary standpoint. We're allocating your budget that you just discussed during the budget study session is inclusive of $7 million, but we know we can take care of these 38 items and what you saw on the map prior. But if a low bid does allow us to do those add alternates on Garibaldi, that would be an extreme help. It is a collector's street that has a lot of use that is challenging in parts of our city, so we'd like to tackle that as well. Next slide, please. So it's $7 million. In the last two slides, I just want to reiterate, we're going from 62% of our streets completed to 73% of our streets completed in a 10-year period. So we've stretched our dollars as far as we can. We've done, thank you. We've done as much as we can going forward. So we're here to answer any other additional questions, and I would defer to the standing committee as well. And we'd like to move forward with this to go out to bid.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Kair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kair. For council questions, we'll start with Councilmember Viscara.
I'm still absorbing it. I'll pass.
I didn't see your street on there, so.
If it didn't meet the criteria, it did not get included.
There's a couple of streets that I'm questioned about every time I walk my dog.
Yeah, there you go.
Councilmember Yu.
No questions for the presentation.
Okay. Councilmember Sternquist.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So, correct me if I heard this correct. So, by the end of 2024, we will have completed 73% of the streets in the city.
We'll have done some level of treatment
Yes.
on 73% of the city streets
Over the past 10 years.
over the past 10 years.
Okay. So then the next obvious question is, what's the story for the next 27%.
I'm glad you asked that question, because
And is
this.
that going to be harder, perhaps, than
Ab-
what we've been looking at so
The
far?
truthful answer is absolutely, it's going to be much, much more difficult,
Okay, and
because
more
we do not
expensive.
have we do not have, this is an accumulation of funding over a period of time that we've tried to stretch out. We will not have this kind of larger bang for our buck in terms of the funding amount. So we will either have to, we won't be able to do this type of project for another 5+ years. So we will either have to look for alternative funding sources over time, or we will have to make some compromise decisions as to some of the rest of the city as well. So it will be an extreme challenge, and during this process, my task is to come back with you to really lay that out and show you kind of where that deficit is and that funding gap that lies to get that remaining 27% done. And then on top of that, you have to go back to the pavement, to the 73% that you've completed, and it just doesn't stay static. You have to do some
Yeah,
level
that's what I was
of
gonna
treatment to that as
Some
well.
of that is going to start coming back.
So
on
that's an additional funding gap that we have as a city, and I don't mean to be glib, but this is it is a big project. It's a significant project. It'll have a great public benefit, but it does not cure the issue of pavement management comprehensively throughout the city.
Well, as Councilmember Vizcarra stated, the questions we will get as elected officials is, when are you going to be doing our streets?
And
Because that 27% are the ones that are going to want to know what's going on. The other 73 are going to be happy, obviously. So obviously you have that on your radar, and it's something that we'll
and
be able
in
to
the course of the next fiscal year, we will have to come back to you with a plan, or at least lay out the problems for you and give you some suggestions on what approaches the council and the city could take in order to address those. But but to be very frank and honest, it is a large funding gap that's
I
there.
understand. And the one question I wrote down earlier than my last question is, it appears that at some point, we're going to have to consider the streets that were done years ago, and they're going to be kind of ready for maybe some type of treatment in the future. Kind of reminds me of that story I heard when I went over the Golden Gate Bridge, that when they start painting it, by the time they get to the end, they got to start on the other side again. So I'm thinking that it maybe not as bad as that, but at some point we have to, that 73% is probably going to start going back down to 60% or 65% at some point, and we're going to have to work not only on the additional 27, but the ones that are coming back to us. So I understand the challenge, but it's something that we are aware of, and we'll just address it. Thank you.
Question. The streets you just completed, like mine and a lot of the non-Las Tunas streets, that looked like a very solid project. And Brian, maybe you addressed it and I didn't catch it, but how long will it effectively stay that way?
Usually, we assume first 10 years we don't have to do anything at all. Any maintenance type of rehab is really nothing more than slurry, because streets will crack. I mean, no matter what you do, you'll have cracks and all that. The goal is to fill those cracks with slurry at certain levels so that you don't get a lot of water into the base. So 10 years to start, but we have streets with 15
Well,
years.
Let me stop you there. Does that call for a large company to come in with huge equipment, or can
No.
city staff do that?
No, city staff cannot do that. It still requires huge trucks and all that, but it's not a very complicated process. It's basically spreading oil with large squeegees on the street, basically. It's not complicated, except it's very impactful.
Thank you.
All right. I guess I was going to add something to what Mayor Pro Tem mentioned. Mr. Kair had mentioned earlier, he referred to a pavement management report that we did in 2018, and you kind of went over that really quickly, but I want to reemphasize that should this project be approved and completed, you alluded to the next step is we would have to update that report, because that report really is one of the key tools that Mr. Cook and Mr. Kair will need to use to answer that funding gap question. And I would say that what you have presented to us today, Mr. Kair, there is a kind of glimmer of hope in this dire financial situation, is that maybe it wasn't as expensive as what the 2018 report stated. So that's what I'm hoping for, but we obviously have to let the engineering run its course before we can reach that conclusion. My hypothesis back in 2018 was that NC's report was much on the conservative side, so the amount of funding gap was eye-popping. So my hope is that once this work is done and all the engineering work that TransTech has done for us over the years gives us better data to maybe narrow that number down so that maybe the number isn't as bad as it looks. But it still doesn't belabor the point that, you know, what Mr. Cook said is we're still in a deficit. This doesn't end the dilemma that we're in. But it's a significant step towards improving the city overall. So thank you for the presentation. There's no other council questions for now. We can maybe open the public hearing. Anyone would like to comment on this item? Mr. Stafford?
Mayor Mann, Mayor Pro Tempore Chavez, council members. I live on a street called Nadine Street. It's bound by Golden West, Temple City Boulevard, Olive, and Broadway. It's in the red color, which is it's in very poor shape. And I'm just wondering, is there a chance to get it in on this project and get it repaired? The street's coming apart. I've had to call the city numerous times to get potholes fixed. There's a pothole by my driveway, which I've almost fallen in. It's just coming apart in little pieces. What's a way to get this on a list to get fixed before somebody gets hurt? I mean, not only Nadine, but Barella and Danes Drive, which is off behind the Adventist Church. There's several other streets like this in the area that are in very poor shape that need some attention. If you could figure out how to do it, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Any other comments on this item? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment. On to final council comments. Councilmember Viscara.
No, I don't have any more. I asked the questions that I wanted to ask.
Okay. Councilmember Yu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This time I saved my comments till now, so I learned my lessons. I think some of the issues that have been brought up are very pertinent. At the budget session, we talked about that we've used up all the available funding, and we've done the majority of the streets here. But I think that to Mayor's point and the Mayor Pro Tem's point, and the Mayor subsequently, and also the city manager's point, the fact of the matter is that the city has done a very good job in stretching the available dollars. And I appreciate what TransTech, Mr. Kaye had suggested, this creative way of, instead of total reconstruction, we're actually doing cold mill and overlay, and because of the nature of our traffic, we were able to stretch the dollars and covering more streets. But the fact of the matter is that there still will be some streets that are in poor conditions, and we just don't have the money to do them all. So I would suggest, based on everything we have discussed so far, first of all, I agree with what's being planned, but I think we as a city really need to look at the reality that the pavement index is going to go down. We have done all the low-hanging fruits, the ones that we can, and then we'll do stretch using alternative methods, as many as the bad streets as we can. But the fact of the matter is that we will have to come to accept that we just don't have enough funds. We need to find an alternative funding source. And as unpopular as it may be, I'll just say it. It will be means assessment to everybody's property. There's just not enough monies in our city's budget. Granted, Mayor, you may say the previous 2018 PMP, pavement management plan, might be a little overly conservative, but it's not going to be a few $1 million. If it's a few $1 million, we would have done it by now. You're talking about a minimum of 10 to 20 or even higher millions of a one-time, and then one-time investment to fix all the remaining poor streets, which are increasingly expensive. And then to Mayor Pro Tem's point that, by the time you finish it, all the better streets are now getting poor. They need either surface seal or some other work. So I think as a responsible city, we have to ask the hard question, ask our residents to step up to the plate and seriously consider perhaps an assessment of some sort to give us enough money as a future income to perhaps sell some bonds to get some one-time money to fix the bad streets, and then have enough money in the future to do enough maintenance to keep them up for a long time to come. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Well, thank you. Councilmember Sternquist?
Just made me think, can sales tax increases be used for pavement management?
If you took something to the ballot, is that the question? Yeah, you can take two approaches, and I'll defer to my colleague. But you can take a special purpose tax, which would require a 2/3 vote, or you can do a general tax and just designate that you would want every year to spend that money on that.
Is that 2/3 also?
No, general tax would be a majority vote.
But you need to make sure we have enough sales tax because there is a limit as to how much you can raise.
Yes, you can only, there's a cap, there's a statewide cap to how much you can actually add on to the entire sales tax roll. So the sales tax is not an unlimited amount of money.
No,
Yeah, you couldn't say, let's go 15%.
No.
I mean, because I know Arcadia raised theirs, El Monte did. What is the cap? Is it 10%?
I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. But there is possibly, but there's a statewide cap, and you cannot go past that.
Okay. I mean, it seems that since that's only 50 plus, or one, that would be an easier thing to do if it met the same objective, right?
Each council would though have the discretion not to fund those as well. So if it's a general tax you have similar to anything in your general fund, council or future councils will have the discretion to fund
or not.
Or not.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. As Mayor Mann pointed out, when that 2018 report came out, I think we all can agree it was pretty dire. I mean, it's like, how are we ever going to do this? But I am encouraged tonight by the direction we are taking. I think staff, TransTech has done a fantastic job in finding other ways of meeting our goals, which I agree with Councilmember Yu in that, we may in the future have to get creative in our funding sources and how we're going to pay for these things. But keeping that in mind, and then, of course, working with staff and coming up with better ways. Maybe in a few years there'll be other sources. Maybe there'll be other ways of engineering these things. They're always making advancements, and obviously we will take that into consideration. But I feel better about where we are now than where we were a few years ago, and I want to thank all who have contributed to this, because it was pretty depressing a few years ago, and like, okay, it was almost like, well, we can't really do much. And now it looks like we are gonna, and 73% is not bad. And I know that, there are challenges ahead, but we're getting there. I think we're moving in the right direction. So I want to thank you for doing that.
And William, just one more thing. I think we're going to hear the most from the people whose streets are not going to be taken care of. So what is the response other than we don't have enough money to take care of that right now? I mean, will this presentation be online, something where we can refer our residents, especially those whose streets are not going to be taken care of in the near future? Because they obviously see other streets being taken care of, and it's why are we the, outsiders here?
Happy to put the presentation online. We do take a lot of, staff and I, our management analyst and our public works department takes a lot of questions
I'm sure.
similar to that. So we try to explain the methodology and the approach that we're taking. And for some, it's obviously a tough and unsatisfactory answer. But we do try to at least explain the methodology, because we want to explain at least the approach that we're taking.
Is there something online now that you reference or can reference? It's a very basic.
I believe I'm almost positive we do. I think I think it's PMP. I'll double check, but
Okay.
Yeah. Oh no.
But if we can even highlight that on our front page or something, interested in, your street being paved or not.
Yeah,
but I just think education's important.
we've shown the pavement management program or plan from last term, and we've actually updated with links to these types of presentations.
Okay.
So we'll make sure to update that as well.
Do you mind if I just do a real quick follow-up? Yeah, and I just want to remind the public that, we will continue taking care of problems as we have been all along, and that is residents or businesses can contact the city, especially if they see a pothole or something in front or whatever, and we will do our best to resolve that. It's not a complete answer. It's sometimes maybe just a Band-Aid, but it's something, and, we will continue to be responsive to your point. I think people need to know that, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I concur with all the comments from council. I think to Councilmember Sternquist's point, I maybe want to double down on that in terms of, are we doing enough to lay out clear information out there in plain language? That sounds odd coming from an engineer, but I think it's important that we be able to describe the situation in as easy to understand of a manner as possible. But also, for those who do want to take a deeper dive into the situation, we make available the kind of information that we have in our presentations and in our reports. And to Councilmember Yu's point, I think that transparency is essential when this inevitably becomes some future item that the council will have to discuss from a funding standpoint. So how can we ask for consideration of different types of funding from our residents if we can't even tell a clear story of what we're trying to do, what the challenges are, right? So that's really our responsibility as a city to demonstrate that we have a plan, but it requires a lot of working together with residents and us to get there. So we want to kind of keep that in mind as a longer term goal. But going back to this specific item, I do want to especially thank TransTech and our city staff for doing a wonderful job, not just on this project, but on the previous projects. Because to me, the essential key information was the ability to track performance over time, right? Because a lot of the engineering done by the consultants and from the outside, they're making certain assumptions about our streets. They're saying, oh, you have this many cars and your street is this thick, so it can only last this long, right? There's a certain lifespan. We were talking about sheriff's cars lifespan, so now we're talking about the lifespan of a roadway. So the better data we have, the better we can predict the performance of future and also kind of give ourselves a bit more confidence that what we're doing is not a, as Mr. Cook said, some sort of engineering compromise. It's not. It's still a sound engineering approach, but now we have data to actually back it up, right? And then to your point also is, yeah, we're gonna get a lot of complaints from residents who did not make this list, right? And I think part of our answer is not just saying we don't have enough money, but also trying to explain the basic, like there is an engineering logic behind why these streets were selected. There could be the engineering reason, there could be the logistical reasons of how construction has to take place. I mean, you can't have a bunch of islands and pockets of roads all over the place because that could make it logistically difficult to achieve. So are we able to explain that in plain language? I think it's a big challenge for us moving forward. But I am very satisfied with what's being proposed. And I think moving forward, I presume after this project is completed or in some time in the future, we will be bringing back a council item to discuss not just the updated pavement management report, but sort of the longer multi-year outlook, right? So you mentioned we're not going to get funds for 5 years to do a project of this scale. What are the financial implications of that citywide? Because like Mayor Pro Tem said, what about the streets that are now going to be 15 years since we last touched it? Those are going to be on this list calling for our attention, right? That has a different cost than trying to fix like Nadine, right, to Mr. Stafford's point. A street that's going to cost maybe 5 times as much to fix the same street that we could just do kind of maintenance work on. What's the better use of taxpayer dollars, right? And that's sort of the uncomfortable policy decisions that we as a body have to tackle. Is intuitively we think we want to tackle the worst streets first, but then we run out of money really quickly, right? So for that same dollar, what if we could tackle 10 times as many streets and keep them in good condition? Does that make more sense from a monetary standpoint? And the engineering practice in general across California has been trending towards using those monies to keep them in good shape so that you never get to a point where you have to spend 3 to 6 to 10 times the amount to fix that same street when you could have avoided it. It's like, I don't want to make an analogy to healthcare, but it's like preventative healthcare versus now I got to go in and get a major operation, right? What's a better use of not just my own health and the limited monies we have. One last thing I will say is, just for historical context, for the longest time, cities have been relying on gas tax, right? And we still do. And then when SB 1 passed in 2017, I think, what that did was, for a lot of agencies, it somewhat stopped the bleeding, right? So everyone was kind of going on this downward trend. SB passed, there was infusion of money, and it kind of stabilized some agencies. Some agencies are still not recovering. For us, we kind of see a little bit of a stabilizing effect, so the rate of deterioration hasn't gone down. But like Councilmember, you said, there's still a deficit, right? So, I mean, I don't want to rely on the state moving to solve our crisis. So one of the hard questions we're going to ask is there something we can do ourselves, right? So that's the big policy challenge that lies ahead. But other than that, I greatly appreciate the proposed project. So thank you again, Mr. Kair and your team. And one last thing, I do want to do a shout out to Mr. Furkan, who was running the PowerPoints. Mr. Kair mentioned he was the key inspector for our previous project. I greatly appreciate that TransTech understands the importance of inspection during construction, because you can engineer the heck out of everything on paper, but if you don't make sure it's done right in the field, it means nothing. So I think the effort and the priority placed on that is yielding the dividends that you have showed in the PowerPoint slide. And so I hope that moving forward with these projects, that the same kind of care and attention in construction is continued. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate that. If there's no other final,
I just want to add one thing
Sure.
to Councilmember Sternquist's point of making the information available online. I'm actually just now looking at the city's website. The 2018 paper management report is online. The 2019 President City Council is online. There's a street resurfacing progress map. However, they're not the most up to date. So maybe that's what we need to do to Councilmember Sternquist's point. We need to incorporate this beautiful presentation, make it available for folks to see, and then they can even see which street that we'll be working on. So
that's a good idea. Thank you. If there's no other questions or comments, could we have a motion for this item, please?
Mayor, I'll move that we authorize the city manager and city engineer to prepare a bid package for city council approval to proceed with the issuance of the notice inviting bids.
We have a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? All right, seeing none, we have a motion second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Sternquist?
Yes.
Councilmember Vizcarra?
Yes.
Councilmember Yu?
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Chavez?
Yes.
Mayor Mann?
Yes. All right, thank you. Next, we move on to update from our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Mann. I'll be brief. The question came up earlier this evening about the monument sign at Las Tunas and Baldwin. The fabrication of the sign is complete. We are working, the city of Arcadia would like to actually redo the right-of-way. There's some ADA access issues that they'd like to address. By the end of the week, we're going to get an update from the city of Arcadia and their Public Works Department on when that work is going to be done. But the sign is actually fabricated, and we'll get a schedule from the city of Arcadia Public Works Department on when they'll be able to do those ADA improvements and improvements all the way through. There's a little bit of leveling that they need to do to some of the concrete, and they like to spruce it up just a little bit more as well. So,
Who's going to install it? We are or they are?
actually, as part of our contract work with the sign installer, the fabricator is going to actually install it, but the Arcadia Public Works Department will be there to make sure they're meeting all their requirements. And then concerts in the park have been kicking off, even with a little bit of gloomy weather. We had a pretty good turnout this last Wednesday for our first concert. We'll be recognizing our volunteers on Friday afternoon and at Live Oak Park.
Friday night?
Friday night, excuse me, 5 o'clock. And then our special meeting on Friday, not at 7 a.m., at 9 a.m. We'll consider the direction that you gave tonight on the budget. Thank you for that. And then we will go over a overview of our objective design standards ideas and see and kind of start from scratch there. And as we heard some concerns and see where we want to go with that. So that's it for me, Mayor. Ma'am.
Said meeting on Friday here?
Yes, it'll be in the council chambers.
And Mr. Cook, is our law enforcement meeting still on for next
Yes,
Wednesday?
our law enforcement meeting is still on for June 28th.
Wednesday.
Okay, Wednesday morning. Thank you for confirming.
Thank
All
you,
right.
sir.
Next, though, is update from our city attorney.
Sure, just wanted to say I will be out of town for the next council meeting, so the assistant city attorney will be covering for me. And with that, happy Independence Day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good time.
All right, next is council reports on ad hoc or standing committee meetings. I know Mr. Cook alluded to the Las Tunas ad hoc. Would you like to report out?
Is there really, I think Brian, city manager, reported adequately. I don't know what we can add to that.
Just asking.
Yeah, we just look at a number of alternatives and just came back with a number for at least budgeting purposes, and then we'll be meeting further to refine that to bring some alternatives back for the whole council to consider.
narrow down the options.
I'm sorry, real quick question. Do we get a timeline on that thing once we approve it? Is it 12 months, 10 months?
We're looking for that to be completed within the fiscal year. The next meeting we have with the ad hoc, we're going to nail down some more timeframes. FIRCON and TransTech have been working with some contractors to get some bids so that we'll have some definitive timelines for you.
By June of next year?
At a minimum.
Okay. Oh, I thought you said at a maximum.
At a max.
At a minimum.
Oh, sorry, at a maximum.
Maximum, yeah. All right.
A little different.
Yeah, a little bit.
All right. Any other ad hoc or standing committee updates? No? All right. Then we go to items separate from the regular agenda, starting with Councilmember Sternquist.
I don't have anything this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Viscara.
Not really, but just a comment.
No more.
As we're talking about repairs in the streets and everything else, there's an overlay here, and that's weather. You know, we don't know what it's going to do, but it has a tremendous impact. So we can't predict it, but it's there.
Yeah, that's a great point, and yeah, I think Mr. Kair alluded to the rains that we had recently, which was kind of a good test of what the recent work was
And
done.
it held up well.
Yeah, because I guess in my experience, we've seen other streets. I won't name them in other areas, but they completed work 1 or 2 years, and then you get a major rain, and then you start seeing a lot of deformation.
The weaknesses.
Yeah, it means
So,
there's some issues occurred. I mean, some would say it's design, but I would say most of it is construction related. How well was it put in?
You would know.
First day of summer tomorrow. Weather.
That's right.
Yeah, but water is the enemy of pavement.
That's tomorrow, isn't it?
Tomorrow, first day of summer.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Yu,
Nothing to add. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Chavez.
Just a couple of quick things. First of all, I want to thank you for not doing Freer again. It's not on the list. I take a lot of flack for that because Freer has been done 4 times, I think, in the last 12 years. People want to know why. I don't know why, but anyway, so thank you for that. Summer concert, good turnout. I mean, it was, considering the weather, it was a good turnout. I mean, you were working.
Some of the time.
You know, but I think tomorrow will be a better turnout. The weather's warming up, and I think it's really good. Just to update on the youth committee, I think I reported last time we received 22 applications. We are going to interview 12 young men and women. I think is it 12, Maggie? 12 young men and women starting soon, and get that. We have 4 positions to fill, so it's pretty competitive. So we'll see how it turns out. And then lastly, you know, in my other life, I've been dealing with Little League Baseball over at Live Oak Park, and I'm proud to say that Temple City American is in the championship game tomorrow night. So if you guys have anything, aren't doing anything, at 7 o'clock, our 8 to 10-year-olds will be playing for the Tournament of Champions championship. And it's funny how time goes by, and how I feel older and older because I was there, and some people that I know came up to say hi, and it turns out that one of the kids who used to play for me years ago now has a kid playing in this tournament.
Wow.
So it goes fast, I'll tell you.
How old are you?
Yeah, I'm getting older. You know, so I'm hitting another decade soon. So anyway, but yeah, it's been and you know what? Shout out to our Parks and Rec, and Adam, I want to tell you that when other cities come to Temple City and play at Live Oak Park, they always tell me what a great park it is, how well maintained, and they just have a good time. And so, you know, thank you and your staff for all you do out there, because it makes a difference. It really does. And so that's it. Thank you.
Great. I don't have much. I just want to give a shout out to the Chamber of Commerce for their mixer last Wednesday. I know a number of us from council were also in attendance, so thank you for supporting the chamber in their efforts to revitalize and rebrand. So I think all of you got you see the new logo.
No, is there,
It's on the paper.
is it?
To your paper. She just-
What paper? Oh,
The
I didn't get a
newspaper.
newspaper.
I believe it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Did they say they had pins or T-shirts or something made up, or they were going?
Well, I think
to?
they're in the process. This was a
Okay.
very recent development
All right.
for the
I didn't get
chamber.
a pic.
They had the new logo pasted on the office door,
Oh,
so
okay.
you may have missed it because
Maybe,
it's
yeah.
just kind of
Looks
there.
nice.
Yeah, so I continue to be the council liaison to the chamber and have been very encouraged by the direction that the board has taken. And definitely a shout out to Stratoscope for running the chamber in a very professional manner. They've been pretty engaged with recent new businesses that have opened in town with grand openings and ribbon cuttings and so on and so forth. They're looking at a lot of different things to kind of bring the chamber back into the fold of a lot of community events. And so I'll continue reporting out as they make progress on that. But I just want to thank the rest of my council colleagues for being so supportive of them through this transition. And I just want to convey that they also greatly appreciate council support. They said it wouldn't have been possible without it, and I think they mean it.
William, you're
genuinely.
going to be the guest, aren't you? What is that date?
Friday?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
That's
Friday at the dive.
yeah. So Friday at the dive at 11:30, the chamber is holding a legislative, I guess they call it a legislative lunch, and they've invited me to be a guest speaker. So I'm more than happy to participate and help them get that kick started. They want to do that in a more routine manner. So this is not some one and done thing. The chamber wants to kind of bring back our state legislatures, our U.S. Congress members, bring in more of that perspective that perhaps we have not have gotten in recent years. So I'm certainly very excited for that and some of the events they have planned out.
Do they have a plan to get more of the merchants involved?
They actually do. They're looking at everything from the membership fee structures to the way things are being advertised, and one of the emphasis is on what kind of value is the chamber bringing to the businesses, right? That was always a question that seemed like it wasn't very clearly answered or addressed. And now that's a focal point for the board and the chamber staff to really look at that. And I also want to thank Mr. Cook for working very closely and staff for working very closely with the chamber, because that's also an essential part of being successful. And I've always been a big advocate of making sure that we are, well, I should say, when I say we, that the chamber and the city are in alignment as much as possible for our business goals, right? Whether you want to call it economic development or just business outreach or anything that a chamber is supposed to do. I think we're starting to take the first steps towards that. It's going to take some time, so I think urge patience from everyone, but I believe we are headed in the right direction. And with that, we move on to additional public comments. Anyone at this time would like to address council? All right, seeing none, we will, before we adjourn, I want to remind everyone that because of the July 4th Independence Day holiday lands on Tuesday, our next council meeting is actually on Wednesday, July 5th.
Wednesday what?
July 5th. Yeah. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.